How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this next edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the podcast, we have something a bit different, and it's hopefully something that I can continue to weave in through the next episodes. So, my great passions in life are right now triathlon, kind of business and endurance sport type of stuff, but also music. Music is a huge piece of who I am. My father was a musician, also an artist. So I have a lot of these creative pieces of who I am. And I had the awesome opportunity of having Nick Goldston, who is a Grammy winner on the podcast. He does a lot of music production. He does a lot of filmmaking and is also an avid triathlete trying to get to the world championship for 70.3s. Today we just have a great conversation here and a little bit about who he is. He's an Italian. Grew up in Italy until he was 6, moved over to New York. Anyway, you'll hear it all in the podcast, and we just walk through his life story, and it is a super awesome time. Please do enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for jumping on, man. Yeah, I know it's kind of early for you.
It's not early. No, it's not
No?
early. It's not early at all. I was going to do some TT intervals, but I decided not to. This was a great excuse.
Are you going to do them later?
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
How regimented are you with, like, training and structure and stuff?
So I used to be extremely regimented, like pretty much would not skip a session for any reason.
Really?
And then at the beginning of this year, actually, I was training pretty much exclusively by myself. And then it's just funny because I love people. I love being around people. But
Yeah.
I guess I just didn't find, I was worried that if I was training with someone, like their intervals wouldn't line up with mine or whatever. And then I met a bunch of people that at the beginning of this year that rode and ran and swam. And so I've just been doing a ton of kind of like, oh, you want to ride today? Let's go ride. I've been doing a lot of that. And that's
Nice.
my fitness has never been better since
Really?
I made that switch. Yeah.
Well, I feel like you probably listen to the body a little bit more, too. Like, if you don't feel like going super hard, you probably don't. Or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been like pretty injury free, luckily too.
Good, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast. It's a pleasure, honestly, to first time get to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Seth.
Yeah, for sure. I guess so. We'll get into the triathlon stuff, but to kind of start off the podcast, I just want to hear from your perspective. If you were to introduce someone to Nick Goldston, how would you do that?
Oh God, that's a good question because I think the way I see myself is like not really a master of any one thing, but I love to dabble in a lot of different things. And I think part of that is just like an excitement for every day, an excitement for life, and a love for people. I really love people, and that just kind of brings me in all kinds of different directions. So I'm like part musician, part athlete, part communicator.
Yeah.
But I just love being around people mostly.
Yeah. So, how old are you?
I'm 33, 1989.
Nice. Were you born out in the West Coast and kind of lived there and grew up?
No, so my mom is Italian, and I actually lived the
nice.
first part of my life in Italy. Italian was my first language. And then we moved to the U.S. when I was 6. Moved to New York. I went to middle school and high school in New York. I went to college in Boston. I went to music school in Boston. And then I moved out to L.A. in 2012 as soon as I graduated. But I'd never actually been to California before. I just knew that the music industry was out here, and so I had to be here no matter what. And I ended up loving it, and I had not found triathlon or endurance sport before I moved here. I was like, I grew up skateboarding, snowboarding, wakeboarding, like those kind of non-fitness sports, not to insult those sports at all, but it's just not the same not the same kind of training. And I thought, there's no way I'll ever be a runner. I mean, forget about that. And my parents ran a bunch, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like miserable. Why would I put myself through that? It's just pain without any enjoyment.
Yeah.
Now here we are.
Oh, that's crazy. So, you said you moved to New York when you were 6. Do you have a lot of memories from living back home?
All my first memories are in Italy.
Oh,
Like,
please tell.
everything. Yeah. I mean, it's just completely different life. Anyone that's lived, I'd say just in Europe, understands this, who has also lived in the U.S. Very different priorities, very different quality of life that's afforded to the average person. This, like whatever you want to call it, the American dream, it's so focused around work and achievement. And I think that slider slides a little bit more towards holistic, like, balance of life in Europe. And there's exceptions, like, and I don't want to say, it's not to say that there's not, great achievers in Europe. I mean, when I think of like sticklers for quality and really high performing, I think of like Germany, right? They're making amazing, German engineering. But when I think of Italy, I think of people that enjoy, like, their main purpose. They feel like their main thing is to enjoy every day, which I don't know. I don't see it as much in the U.S. Maybe a little more in California, maybe a little more in like. Maybe also in like the center of the country in the South, but I feel like in New York, it's not about enjoying life.
Grind.
It's about performing. Yes, it's about trying to get as much out of each day as possible, and not in the form of enjoyment.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I've thought quite a bit about that because when I went to college, I started my first business, and that was kind of my mindset because of the few people that I had met in the beginning who really inspired me to like be an entrepreneur. Just for disclosure, one of my friend's dads that we had in the episode, he co-founded Oakley Sunglasses. So like that, I met this guy when I was like, I think I was about to turn 21, and because I'd met his son, for whatever reason, it just made me feel like, oh, I can do something great. But it was just for years, for like 3 or 4 years, just pouring myself into trying to, like you're saying, all about achievement. It wasn't about like necessarily enjoying the day, and it was exhausting. And I've since thrown that mindset kind of out the window.
Well, this is the big issue here, is I think this is not a one size fits all thing. For some people, the way that they're going to find their most happiness and satisfaction is by grinding every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know one of my best friends is this drag queen. She's like never resting, always working on something, and like has a million ideas, and this is the way that she finds happiness. That's not the way I do. I have to love what I'm doing to trick myself into doing it. Like even when I'm doing music production work, that's a little more technical and fidgety kind of stuff. That's not as fun as like singing into a microphone or whatever. I have to convince myself like, oh, but this is going to be good when it sounds good and I can hear it all and it's going to give me this emotion. So I think it's different for everyone, and I think maybe Europe has a little bit more of a balance with that. It's hard for me to say Europe as a whole. I assume Europe as a whole, but at least the region of Italy that I'm from.
Yeah, for sure. What region was that?
It's called Friuli, but the city I'm from is Udine, north of Venice.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, it's not a touristy town at all. It's like it's a very much. I'm trying to think of, I don't know, like Boise, Idaho. Like non-Americans have never heard of Boise, but people that live in Boise love Boise. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, for sure. So recently so my mother's my mother's grandmother is 100% Italian, and that whole side of the family, they're all from like Florida and Ohio now, but they immigrated like 2 or 3 generations ago. So I always thought like I was going to be this high percentage of Italian, and I went and did a 23andMe about, I don't know, a year ago now. It was a sad disappointment. I'm like 99% Northwestern European, but I'm only like 5% Sicilian. And I was like, oh, no. Because I'd been telling everybody, that's why I get my like dark hair, dark eyes.
First of all, being Italian is a state of mind, okay, Seth? So
there you go.
You can be 100% Italian if you want. So my mom is 100% Italian, and her 23andMe came back 100% Italian or some crazy high number.
Yeah.
And mine came back only like 23 or something, or 32% Italian. Yeah, so it's funny how genetics work like that, where you can take more or less of a parent's genes.
Yeah. And what would they call it before those borders were drawn?
Yeah. So that's what's actually interesting is the region that my mom is from is like actually Austro-Hungarian until like, because Italy is a very relatively new country. It was all just a bunch of individual city-states that then got amalgamated into this one country like 150 years ago or something like that. And that's why you have these huge variances in dialects and languages even within the country. Now with the internet and television, almost everyone speaks like pure Italian, or at least there's something very close to it. But it used to be that everyone spoke their kind of individual dialect, and then some people also spoke the pure Italian. And now it's the other way around. Like everyone kind of speaks pure Italian, but some people also still have their dialect that they speak in their region. And these regions where they speak these dialects can be so small. Sometimes if you live in like a valley, it's just a like 10 miles in each direction where this
Yeah.
dialect is spoken, and you go over a pass, and it's a completely different dialect because these valleys used to be, impassable or
Yeah.
at least extremely inconvenient to pass
That's
from
super
one to the
fascinating.
other.
You seem to have like a great deal of understanding of the history of Italy. Did you ever study
I
this?
don't at all. I don't at all. It's just like, I mean, it's like you know that there's 50 states and that there used to be
Yeah.
the colonies and all this stuff. It's just because you barely probably paid attention in high school like I did. It's the same
Exactly.
thing in Italy. It's just I've spent a lot of time there. I still go back there every year, and my parents live there currently. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about the dialects and just like the short geographical distance, but because of the mountainous regions, the lack of communication. Because so I've been to Papua, Indonesia, which is the other half of the New Guinea side of the island.
got it.
And this island, just the island of New Guinea, has I think over 500 different distinct languages, not even to count the dialects. So
Wow.
Indonesia is kind of like, that's what Indonesian spoke around the area, but this area is so diverse, and I think it is because a lot of that, and there's still, you can only go so far interior. Like I took in this crazy bush playing with some people, and they went like hiked in another day, and you're meeting people who have like never seen an iPad for the first time, but it's interesting that other
Right.
languages are so differently, or so
Yeah.
different.
I wonder how early humanity got to like Southeast Asia versus
Yeah.
Western Europe.
Yeah.
Because if they got there much sooner, which I imagine they might have, it's just given those languages a chance to evolve more so and differentiate them from each other.
Yeah, super wild. Super wild. So siblings, do you have any?
Yes, I have two older siblings from my dad's previous marriage. My dad was like born and raised Oklahoma farm boy. Like
Nice.
had illiterate parents, lived on a farm, walked to school with his shoes in his hand because he wasn't allowed to wear his shoes outdoors. And he got married like a good Oklahoma boy when he was like 22 or something like that, and had two kids. And so actually one of them lives in LA now. And I get along with him real well too.
Okay.
And he's used to be like a fantastic swimmer and a fantastic runner.
Oh, really?
We get along really well. We talk about triathlon all the time. And then I have an older sister as well. She lives in New York. And then I have a younger sister who's my full biological sister, and she lives in Austin, Texas.
Okay, nice.
And I'm the only one that tries this hard at sport, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about with music? Was that something that you feel like you really inherited, or is that something that
Well,
you
my
shared
parents
with-
are both artists, like visual artists. And
Okay.
my younger sister is a writer. My older brother is a writer. And my older sister also works in art. So we're all artists.
Yeah.
But no, like my parents liked music a lot, but they weren't like, I wouldn't even say they were huge music fans. They just, those people that they listen to music and they just love it, and they would put music on without even trying to have too deep of an understanding of it. But I think when I was younger, it was part that I just liked the identity that being a musician gave me. I thought that was fun. And then I also remember like being in the car with my dad, and we were listening to like a live recording of Elvis Presley.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, this is so silly, but this is really part of the reason I got into music. Elvis, I noticed that girls really liked Elvis, and I thought,
Boom.
okay,
That's all the motivation you need.
what can I get from this? It's like, okay, he's a musician. Maybe I should try that. And it never worked out in that sense, but I did get a career out of it. So
Yeah.
at least that.
That's crazy. So when did you, I mean, this was your first interaction with music, but when did you start to decide, obviously before college, I would assume, this is where I want to go with
I
life?
think I was like 6.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was right away. I was like, I think I used to say I'm going to be a rock star. Which
Nice.
is funny because I have no desire at all to perform live like that now. But yeah, I've always, I knew as I was a kid. I mean, just as much, I guess, as like a kid thinks they're going to be a professional baseball player or something, right? And then they grow out of that, but I did not grow out of it. And in many ways, I try to hold on as much as I can to a lot of things from childhood. And adapt them to be manageable for adult life. But the excitement for every day and the wonder for things and the I think the magic that music can bring you, and all art, but for me, really, music gives me this like a lot of like, I don't want to simplify it down to euphoria, but some kind of magic feeling. I still try to find that, and I still do find it in my work.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So like the music you listen to, or listen to as well? Do you ever get that same matched feeling? Or is it a different one when you create it?
It's
and
so
listen to
funny.
it?
It's so funny you asked that. And I don't know how interesting this will be for your listeners because it's getting a little bit in the weeds
Bring it on. I love it.
of music stuff. But when you, I think this is not unique to me. This happens to most music creators, at least people who are writing music and producing it, not just players.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of becoming better at creating music is having this like self-critical voice in your head all the time, which I think for me has been very healthy. About, is this good? Why is it good? How can I make it better? You know, music isn't like film or photography where you can pause the image and analyze it in that sense. Music only exists in a transient state where it's passing through time. You have to experience it in real time. If you slow it down, you change the character of it and it becomes meaningless. So listening to music at that level or with that intention, you start to have this thing where when you listen to other music, it kind of is a flip that switches. You can't help but listen to it with this critical ear. And a little bit, you lose this ability to fully enjoy it the way that you used to. I do think that happens to most music people who are producing music, whether it's writing or arranging or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I can have that enjoyment, but it has to be, I need some kind of different context for it because, I mean, as bad as it sounds, when I hear a really good piece of music, that's something that I could have done, that there's a feeling that I have to fight of envy. Because I think, well, I had all the tools to make that same thing. How come I didn't think of that? It's such a good idea. So I listen to a lot of music that I then end up not creating. And so, for example, I listen to a lot of ambient music without lyrics, and I love it. And I don't create much of that. I mostly write music with lyrics, and I think it's because I can kind of get out of that. I can let the ego out of it and just try to enjoy it.
Yeah. That's super deep. Yeah, I never have thought about it from, like you were saying about how music's a transient thing. It has to be moving through time.
It has to be moving, which makes it really difficult for a lot of things. It's very difficult to edit it in a meaningful way that's beneficial. Whereas like we're seeing all this stuff with AI and image manipulation with Photoshop and stuff where it's like, oh, you can just highlight this thing. It's like add a bear and there's a bear in the image,
Boom,
and it just looks great, and music, I think it could potentially get there.
It's going to get there.
But it's complicated.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting. So, I want to come back a little bit more to the feeling of the music stuff here in a second, but I'm curious, because from reading on the internets, it looks like you got a degree in songwriting and, quote, music business.
Wow, yes.
With a minor in acoustics and electronics.
Wow, look at you. You did some deep diving there. Very nice.
So it wasn't that deep, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I did find that. So I'm curious. I went to business school as well. I stand on the side of the camp where I think that business school is like a waste.
Yeah.
It's all about the people you end up meeting. That sounds like it may not be the case for like music business, and obviously like you're doing it. So tell me about your degree and how you feel like it's helped.
Well, okay. Well, in the sense of, so that double major I did they were fully separate from each other. And the music business degree, everything I learned in school was absolutely, I was able to learn it through a textbook. No doubt.
Yeah.
And is it a waste? No, but only because of what you already said. Because the people you meet and the school, I went to Berklee College of Music, which has a huge network in modern music production, and that was a big part of it to me. But I always intended to use that information to supplement and facilitate my songwriting and production. I never intended for it to be. I didn't want to be a businessman in music.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So I agree with you in that sense, where the information I learned from the music business degree, if I were motivated enough, I absolutely could have learned it just from only, to be honest, just a few books that I could recommend. But the songwriting degree, that was being at school was invaluable. Absolutely. And a part of it was the professors and the feedback you get from professors.
In writing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And a big part of it is also getting the conversations and the feedbacks and the constructive criticism you get from other students every week in class. Basically the best thing that could have happened to my musicianship. And funny enough, now I teach a graduate course for Berklee College of Music on songwriting. So I'm now on the other side of things.
Yeah. Do you enjoy teaching?
Love it. Absolutely love it. Not that I hope Berklee never hears this, but I would do it for free.
Yeah. We'll tag him.
Yeah. Please don't. No, I really love it. And it's really interesting to see the differences in understandings and how these students can have such a tight grasp on, for example, how to phrase a lyric about a certain type of thing, and then be so mystified about how you would write a melody in a certain musical mode, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's about, and then I have like maybe 10 students in the class each semester, and it's about trying to balance these things and take really abstract concepts. Like I said, the transient nature of music. You have to take these abstract concepts like emotions and try to make them tangible and understandable for people. That's kind of the fun part. It feels like a little puzzle every time.
Yeah, that's super neat. So I also read that you've produced like Billboard charting songs. You've worked on movies, TV commercials, different stuff like that. What is your favorite type of music to produce, or do you have one?
Oh, so my favorite thing to do is to take something is a challenge, like something new and different. So I'm really used to and pretty good at just taking a song that's supposed to be emotional and with acoustic instruments and getting emotion out of it. So like acoustic guitar, piano, and vocal, and maybe strings. I've done it so many times. It's lost the appeal to me. So at one point, someone approached me to do some children's music, and making that was the most fun I had had at the time, because it was so different. It was a different set of guidelines, and every style of music has kind of these, like, I don't know what you call them, like guardrails. Yes. It has these guardrails that you have to kind of live with it. You don't have to, but that to be successful in that genre, for the most part, you live within. And they, some of them have much wider guardrails when it comes to melody, and much narrower guardrails when it comes to rhythm or certain kinds of production. And so it's just fun to live within that, and limiting yourself to what you can do sometimes brings the most amount of creativity, because you have these, like, it's like, okay, you have to write a song, but none of the words can start with a vowel. That's silly. I just came up with that. But sometimes you, because of these kind of tight guardrails, you come up with something that's really interesting, and hopefully the listener doesn't even really notice that none of the words started with a vowel. They just hear this thing that feels special and different. So the children's music did that for me. I also did, I did a blues song. I've done a few blues songs. That was different. I've done fitness music albums. That was different and fun. So that's the most fun, is to try something different and new. I don't know if it's part of my ADD nature to switch it up all the time like that, but the challenge is what's fun.
Yeah, that's super neat. So with your minor in acoustics and electronics, were acoustics like audio acoustics? Here's how you design a sound room, or it was?
Yes, exactly. It's understanding the physical properties of sound and how it interacts with different spaces. And the point of that was to just have a basic understanding, but I try to leverage that to increase the quality of my sound recordings as much as possible. And when you run into an issue, trying to problem solve it. And it was really fun. I really loved that side of it. A lot of it was math there, but understanding the properties of sound has been, for example, like this room that you see me in here, it has all this like foam everywhere. People think that that's to stop the sound from escaping the room, but it actually has almost no effect on that. It's so that sound doesn't reflect within the room. Because just like waves in the ocean, when they if two waves coming at each other in opposite directions, if their peaks hit each other, then that peak becomes twice as high as either the peaks of the individual waves. Whereas if like a low point in a wave hits a high point in a wave, then they kind of cancel each other out. Same properties happen with sound waves. And so it's about balancing those things, and you want the purest possible signal to enter the microphone. And when you're listening on speakers, you also don't want the room to have an effect on how frequencies interact with each other. So that's just, maybe that's a little too specific, but little things like that and many others are helpful. And it's stuff you could learn on the internet, but I thought it would be fun to take those classes. And I was always taking more credits than was required, just because I loved school a lot, and I wanted to get as much out of it as I could.
Well, that's good. That's so much different than me.
What did you do for school for the music, the business stuff?
Yeah, so I did an associate's in construction management. I just finished that because I was dating a girl whose dad owned a construction company, had no sons, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally take over his
Definitely do
business.
that, yeah.
And then we broke up, and I was like, oh, well, that sucks. So I guess I'll finish that. And then I did a bachelor's in just business management, and it was, like I said, I started a business when I was in school, and I was literally in all my classes just doing the business stuff rather than that. When I first met my now wife, I was like, hey, I think I'm gonna drop out of school. Like, I don't really think. And she was like, no, you have to finish. And I'd never truly finished anything in my life that was
Right.
like of any length. So I finished, and
Well, you're
I don't
married.
regret
That's
it.
something.
Yeah, exactly. That's what most people say. It's a running joke. So I went to Southern Adventist University, but it's like a joke that people call like Southern Matrimony College because everyone just goes there to get married.
Got it.
So yeah,
Got it.
that's how it ended up working out. But yeah, so I did that. And I wouldn't change it now. I was a little bit more sour in the beginning just because I was so burnt out, and like private colleges are just stupid expensive. It's like 30, 40 grand a year, and I wasn't making that. So, but
No, it's crazy. I do think that's another big difference between Italy and here, is there are some private colleges that wealthy people send their children to, but for the most part, people are going to state-supported schools that are much more affordable, and there's less of this kind of college ethos in Italy. It's not like this thing that is going to be the best years of your life. Yeah, the way that we kind of have positioned it in the U.S.
Yeah, for sure. Do you know if professors get paid better in the
No, professors get paid better here.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Not me, by the way, but just,
not enough for that class.
not enough.
So, with the minor, I just want to touch on this one more time. In electronics, was that like equipment, or is it electronic music creation?
Oh no, it's not electronic music creation. It is like resistors and amplifiers, that kind of stuff. It was understanding a lot of. I think the minor came from, in music, there's something called like modular synthesizers or synthesizers in general, and they used to be all hardware based. Now there's computer chips in them that amplify this, that modify the sound a lot. But it used to be all like kind of standard, like I don't want to get too into it, but
Please do.
tube filters and resistors and like really cool ways to modify sound using interesting technologies like light LEDs. And so I think the minor was created to have a deeper understanding of those if you wanted to get into that.
Yeah, for sure. I remember, so my dad was a musician / visual artist, and he had all kinds of stuff laying around the house growing up, but he had this, I forget even what it was called or what the brand was, but it was like a beat machine, but it had...
Was it an MPC potentially? Was it like a square with pads on it?
Yeah, it was square with pads, but it had actual tubes on it. The vacuum tubes, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool.
And it was the coolest thing because I made like these 4 tracks that kind of looped, and then you could go to the next one and you know, whatever. And I had my dad's nice speakers blowing up the house. And I just remember that thing being so awesome. And I wish I would have paid attention more. But he offered me, he's like, hey, I'll let you keep this instead of, because I was like on his case to get an Xbox. That's all I wanted.
Right, of course.
And he was trying to like really nurture this part of me, I guess, and he offered me that thing, and I turned it down for a stupid Xbox, and now I totally regret it because I'm like, what has like vacuum tubes on it anymore?
It's so
like
easy to look back and say that, but like that Xbox may have brought you a lot more joy than that piece of music equipment ever would have. You know, it's hard to say, and we kind of like, I think we tend to glorify these artistic things as things that are going to bring us the most joy, but it isn't for everyone. I don't think you made a bad choice there. I also used to play a ton of video games as a kid.
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I going to do as an adult? Like, how am I going to get by? And somehow I just don't play video games at all anymore.
Yeah. Well, you sound busy. That's probably
I am very busy. Yeah, I'm very busy. Yeah.
So, kind of 2 questions wrapped in one. When you write, do you write what you're feeling in the moment, or do you write for what you want to feel or something that you felt in the past?
That's a great question. It's a great question because a lot of writers, I would say this, really good writers do not need that real life emotional impulse to create something great. Their craft is such that they can do so without, they can kind of empathize with the situation and create a story around it and write something really compelling. Right. And so I kind of aspire to that. But there's obviously recently I've actually had a lot of songs that I've been writing that come from a, kind of like a real place, and it's really fun and kind of cathartic to do that. But the reason I got into songwriting specifically, because I was always into music, but the reason I got into songwriting specifically, I think, is I was just listening to records as a younger adult, maybe I would consider even a kid, and I remember actually specifically listening to Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls, and thinking like, how am I feeling all of this from this song? This is incredible. I want to be the person that makes someone else feel this. Because as I was writing it, I was kind of just lost in amazement at the person that created this. And I kind of, I guess, selfishly had the feeling of, I want to be the person that makes someone else feel like this. So that's not really like, I wasn't thinking, oh, what did this person go through to make them feel like this? I thought, what skill, like what crazy craft does it take to have such a grasp on this abstract emotional art to be able to make people feel like this? And I was so interested in being able to do that. And little did I know, it's like such a crazy rabbit hole, and it's not one thing. It's a combination of a lot of different skills, like engineering and producing, arranging, mixing, mastering, writing, being able to take control of an emotional moment in a song and exploit it as much as you can. It's music is really a combination of so many different things, in a way that, like, even in the movie industry, you have someone that specializes in coloring the video. You have someone that specializes in lighting the scene. You have someone that specializes in doing the makeup for the artist. And in music, that used to be a little more segmented in that way, but more recently, it's usually someone like me that does every one of those things. So you have to have a pretty widespread arrangement of abilities and
talents. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to.
That's
I
why
don't want to blow myself up too much, but it's you lose probably some quality there, because if you have someone that really specializes in each one of those things working together, but at the end when it's finished, and at least for me, when I have the feeling that I created it and no one else, it feels really special.
I'm sure it does. Where do you think that desire comes from to evoke a feeling or an experience in someone else?
I don't know if it's just inherent in I guess my parents raised me to I mean, they were very passionate people. My parents, or they're both still alive, are very passionate people. They're both artists, but they're very passionate about life in general. And I think that nurtures this feeling of maybe emotional vulnerability that can make music more enjoyable if you're more emotionally vulnerable with it. And so I think just because of that, feeling that feeling, I think it's a natural human instinct to want to share it with everyone. It's just like when anything good happens, people share it with their friends or their family or anything like that. And I think I wanted that as well. Or maybe it comes from a more ego-driven place of, I like how people see me when they think of me as someone that has great control over a song. Or it might be a combination of both. But I do think there's this natural human tendency to want to share something that is extravagant or really pleasurable with other people.
Yeah, there's a lot of life to be derived from sharing experiences.
Yeah. I mean, for me, one of my favorite things, for example, is taking athletes that aren't really used to like trail running or going to biking in beautiful places, and taking them to these places. And I just love seeing the look on their face as they light up. Like, for example, this weekend, I'm going trail running in Sequoia National Park, and I'm taking some people that I can't wait to see their faces when they see how gorgeous these trails are. We're going to swim in lakes and rivers and run over these high mountain peaks. It's just, I'm so excited for it.
I'm jealous. That sounds super fun. Yeah, go for it.
Do you live in a place that you can get like trail running?
Yeah, so I live just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. So it's definitely a different feel than the mountains.
It's like
out
foresty,
west.
Right? It's kind of like, and do you have like rolling hills though?
Yeah, and I grew up in North Carolina, so we had mountains. They weren't like the insane, peaks of Colorado and California, but it was very much like beautiful. You're getting quite a bit of snow up in the wintertime, and it's different. A lot of the way that the forests look out here, depending on where you go, there's not as much old growth, but it is pretty dense with how they kind of replanted stuff. So it gives its own beauty for sure. There's a great trail running spot if you're ever out east. I would say it's the best trail running or trail ever on the East Coast. It's Mount LeConte, and it's probably like 6 or 7 thousand feet, but it's in Gatlinburg area. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
I'm Googling it.
Yeah, check it out. Like it has these weird like rock structures that have just holes in the middle of them, so you can kind of look through these little peaks with these holes that kind of overlook. Are you looking at the pictures?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Yeah, give it a Google. It's like I've been up there twice.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Wow, this looks beautiful.
Yeah.
So this is what I'll say. I don't want anyone to think I'm bashing the US, but in Italy, I mean, this is so the nature that the US has, I feel like is unmatched in variety and quality. Like there's other countries that will have beautiful nature, but the fact that we have all of this variety here, we are
you got
so
Yellowstone
lucky. So beautiful. Wow, this looks amazing.
Yeah. So you ever come out to the East Coast?
Kind of. I go to New York because my parents still have a house in New York.
Okay.
And so I'll go there for like Christmas, but not much, to be honest.
Come on out.
Yeah, I'd be more interested in going where you are than back to New York.
Yeah. New York's tough.
New York's
Are they in
tough.
upstate or like city?
No, they're on Long Island, so about
Okay.
40 minutes east of Manhattan.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's like no nature in Long Island.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what does a day in the life of Nick look like? From music producing to triathlon to what all are you doing?
Right. So just like I like to change things up with the kind of music I'm producing, I really don't have a schedule every day. It's kind of like what is important to get done today.
Yeah.
So every day I kind of check in with I also have a podcast, that Triathlon Life podcast. I have it with Eric Lagerstrom and Paula Findlay.
Sure.
Thank you. And so I kind of make sure that everything's running smoothly with that. I try to answer any like messages about that every day. And like I just check that, I don't know, that there's no comments or something that I need to take care of. And then I do the same thing with my students. I like make sure that all of them are taken care of. I answer them back or whatever. And then I kind of I train like 15 to 20 hours a week for triathlon.
That's a lot for those who don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what you would expect from someone who is trying hard at it. And I'm not to say that I'm good at it, which I'm not really that good at it, but I'm in that sphere of people who are trying to be good at it. It's not like a hobby kind of casual thing. Like I think about it a lot. I care about it a lot. I put a lot of effort into it. So depending on like, I'll swim Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll swim in the morning. So that'll be one of the things I would do on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then I kind of like visualize my training all throughout the day, for whatever I'm going to do that day. It helps me
get an mental mindset.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I feel like some people like to show up to a training session and just look at the training, look at whatever they have in the schedule from their coach or their training plan and just attack it blind. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
Like, I like to be like, okay, 5 times 5 minutes with 60-second recoveries at 300 watts is going to be hard, but I can handle it. Like, and if I can't, this is how I'm going to mentally approach it when I'm like really failing an interval or something like that.
Yeah.
That helps me a lot. So I'll think about that. And then if I'm producing a record for an artist, I probably am like working all day on that. I'll usually FaceTime with Eric and Paula, these 2 friends of mine from the podcast, like at least once a day. And we'll just chat about whatever's going on in our lives. And then I also do a bunch of like filmography stuff. I do music videos and short brand pieces for athletic brands like New Balance or Lululemon or On Running or whatever. So I might be working on something like that. And then I am also like a freaking addicted to socializing. So I'm like constantly FaceTiming and texting with people while I should be working.
Nice.
So a little bit of that every day.
For the music side and the producing, and even the film work and the stuff you're doing, is this all like freelance contracts or yeah? Nice.
Yeah, I don't have an employer. It's just word of mouth. I'll just get like an email from someone or a call from someone. And I think it's so funny, like growing up and being kind of I don't want to say addicted, but so over the top with socializing and loving talking to people. Yeah. I did have this feeling of guilt a little bit, like shouldn't I be focusing on my music, which was all I had at the time. It was like, shouldn't I be trying to be as good as I can at music? And what has happened is there are plenty of, I mean, countless amounts of people in LA that are more skilled than I am in music production and writing.
Yeah.
But I think the reason I get work for the most part is
Networking.
people just, they kind of like to work with me because I'm, I guess, good enough, and I'm pleasant. You know, I don't complain. I really like creating the stuff I create. I think that goes a long way with people, and the networking too. And so in a way that guilt I had was really misplaced because it has helped my music career in the end. And it's also the same. It's the only reason I have a podcast with Eric and Paula is it's not because I'm a elite age grouper, right? Like I'm totally not. It's because I really liked them, and I reached out to them and started chatting with them years ago. And then somehow it evolved into what it is now.
Yeah. Tell me, how'd you meet him? Like, what is it like? Eric
Well,
on
it's
Instagram?
so funny. It's so funny. Yeah, through Instagram, I messaged Eric. This was years ago now at this point. But I told him that I really loved the YouTube show and that I thought it was doing something really cool in triathlon, that because Eric has this YouTube channel, That Triathlon Life. And I just thought it was so cool. And it was doing something different in a way that I was excited about in triathlon. And so I messaged him and I was like, dude, I love what you're doing. And professionally, I'm a musician, and I would love to. I have a bunch of songs that don't really have a home that if you wanted to use for the show, I would love it if you did. I just want to help it grow. You don't have to give me credit. You don't have to shout me out at all. Just, I would love it if you used it. And this was at the time where the show was not nearly as popular as it is now. Yeah. So I think he had the time and the bandwidth to actually read that message and respond to me.
Yeah.
And so he used some of the music in there. And I don't know, it's just like Eric and I think we seem very different on the surface, but our core motivators are extremely aligned. And we clicked big time over cameras, over music, over the way that we see sport and what excites us about it. And we just became like very quickly very best friends. And it's the same with Paula. Like I love Paula. I love Eric and Paula. Like the three of us are kind of, I mean, we just talk every day.
Yeah.
And that's how it evolved. And I was telling them for years that I thought they should start a podcast. Because I kind of like listened to two separate podcasts a lot. One was called If I Were You. It's a comedy podcast.
Okay.
And one was the Trainer Road podcast.
Okay.
And both of them had the same format, which was just they take questions and they answer the questions. And so I told them, like, that's what you guys should do. Just make it about that. And they're like, we do too much already. And then one day, I think Eric was like, okay, we're going to do the podcast under one condition. You have to be on the podcast with us. And I was like, oh, that's not a good idea. No one's going to want to hear no one knows who I am. It's like some random guy who's just going to, like, non-pro who's going to be on the podcast. And I actually think he was right on with it. I think not necessarily me, but I think the podcast works best with someone who is kind of like on the outside, who maybe can throw a joke in or two. Not to say that I'm funny, but I definitely try to be.
No, yeah, you are. I've listened to it quite a bit and YouTube as well. So yeah, good work. That's awesome. So how many downloads do you have to date? You know?
Oh my God, that is so funny that you asked, because today we hit 1 million downloads.
Nice. That's insane.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think actually we have much more than 1 million, but the way that our podcast distributor counts them is very conservative. So technically through them with Buzzsprout.
Okay. Why do you like Buzzsprout?
I Googled it 2 years ago or whatever, and it seemed like a good enough choice. They kind of just trusted me with all the behind the scenes stuff. So I also do all the editing for the podcast and all that stuff.
Nice, man. You are busy. So so you're training 15, 20 hours a week, and then you're working how many hours a week?
It really depends, but some weeks it's like, I'm at the point now where I don't watch TV shows. I don't watch movies. I don't sit down and watch things. I'm always kind of doing something. Yeah. I'd say my version of, I feel like I know some people that just watch like 2 or 3 hours of Netflix every day. And that's the way they wind down. I'm not yucking it. But for me, I think that is socializing. So like I'll go out and see people pretty much every day of the week.
Sure.
And I don't drink alcohol, so I can like afford to go do those things, and I feel fine the next day. So I feel like some people, they're like, oh, I'm hungover or whatever. So I get to my cake and eat it too. I don't like alcohol. It's not even a choice I really had to make.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
it's purely you just don't like it. That's why
I
you don't
just
drink.
don't like it, and it's actually really funny. In college we had actually in one of the acoustics class, it was a psychoacoustics. It was about like the perception of sound and how your ears like translate these sound waves into brain waves and all this stuff. And there was some people can't really hear pitch. They can't differentiate pitch. It's like do and do. They'll sound like the same sound to them. They can't really hear the
I
difference.
know that.
And we call it colloquially, it's called being tone deaf. You may have heard that before.
I know a few people.
Yeah, there you go. And there's like we learned about this woman who like kind of like goes around, and it's her thing to try to prove to the world that people can't hear pitch and it's all a lie and everyone's just lying and they don't want to be found out, but that it's not real. And she's so convinced about it because she can't hear it.
Oh,
That's
my.
kind of how I feel about alcohol. I'm like,
Yeah.
all of you are lying. This stuff tastes terrible. Doesn't
so
make you
funny.
feel great. You feel
Yeah.
terrible the next day. And then on top of it all, it's like
Where's the
also it's expensive. And as an athlete, it's like it's so counterproductive.
Oh yeah, I throw you back a few days.
Yeah. So for me, I don't know. It's such an easy choice to make.
Yeah. That's so cool. So I've been touching a ton on the music thing, which is one more because most
Sure,
people
sure.
I interview are like professional athletes and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
I love
right,
this
of
side of
course.
it. But with the music stuff, I remember. I think I didn't actually find this. I didn't Google super hard, but you do have something that was Grammy nominated or won a Grammy.
It won, yeah.
Nice. So tell me about that. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's like a crazy thing.
That was crazy. That was really crazy. So yeah, I produced this. I produced a bunch of songs for this guy. His name is Kingfish. He's a blues guitarist, and he's unbelievable. A lot of people would say he's the best blues guitarist in the world.
Wow, I'm gonna check him out. Kingfish.
Unbelievable. And I kind of got hooked up with his manager and did a few songs for him. And one of these songs, a song called Rock and Roll, we released it as a single, and it was. I really loved the way it came out. And so then his album came out, and the single was used as a bonus track on the album. And it kind of like helped drive the sales of the album a little bit, but mostly it was just like I was lucky that it was even on the album. And then just crazy, the album got nominated. And to me, like the Grammy nomination, it was enough to be like, that's the win, you know?
Yeah.
That's the best thing.
We
that
made
could have
it. Here
happened.
we are.
We made it. And it's kind of like how some people treat, like, what would you say, what percentage of your audience is triathletes?
Probably 70 right now.
Okay, got it. So high. So it's kind of like how some people treat qualifying for world championships, right? It's like, oh, I don't actually care how well I do at world
Yeah, I
championships.
made it
I
to
just
the
care that I made it. That's how I felt. Like getting nominated, I'm like, wow, it's all icing on the cake now. And got to go to the Grammys, and for this 1 year, it was in Vegas. It was last year. It was in Vegas because LA was having some strict COVID protocol stuff that the Grammys just were trying to work around. So it was in Vegas. So my girlfriend at the time and we went to Vegas and did the whole thing. And I'm sitting there, and it's just me, my girlfriend at the time, Kingfish, and his manager. And like we're just the four of us sitting there. And when they called our category and they said the album won, we just flipped out. I mean,
That's so weird.
I have it all on video too. It was
Please send it to me.
weird, crazy, surreal, life-changing moment for me. So, I mean, I only had one song on that album, but it won Best Blues Contemporary Album.
That's so
And
cool.
I have a plaque, outside here that's has a big Grammy stamp on it with my name on it and what I did on the song.
Wow.
So, for example, for that song, I didn't write the song. Someone else wrote the song, and it wasn't Kingfish. It was these Nashville writers. But I played every instrument other than the lead guitar and some of the solos. I didn't sing the lead, but I sang backgrounds. I played every instrument other than that, did the arrangement, did the mixing, did the mastering. So it felt like my thing. So when the Grammy, when we got the Grammy win, it felt like so special.
Yeah.
So
That's
special.
so cool, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This
Thank
wasn't
you.
like this was like just a few years ago, right?
It was, not this past Grammy year, the year before that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was wild. And then, Eric and Paula had just raced. I was down at Oceanside with them.
Yeah.
And then I drove straight from Oceanside to Vegas. Or actually, maybe I came home first. I guess I had to pick my girlfriend up. So, and then drove straight to Vegas, and then won. And then straight from Vegas, drove up to Mammoth and camped with Eric and Paula for a few days and just basked in the
Yeah.
the
I'm a Grammy
euphoria.
winner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wild.
Other than like the plaque and stuff, do you get any like obviously recognition and whatnot? But do they hand you a check for 10?
No, that check. No, not at all. No, you have to. Actually, if you win, you don't have to pay for the plaque. But if you do, like if you get nominated, you're also entitled to like some kind of certificate, and you have to pay $110 for that. Like they make bank from that.
What?
And the tickets to the Grammys, I think, were $200 each. So I had to pay for that too, and hotels in Vegas on Grammy weekend. Oh no, I lost money on that for sure.
Yeah.
But no, of course, I mean it adds just a perceived level of legitimacy to all that I do. And when I'm telling people how much I charge for a song, for example, that's in the back of their head as a qualifier.
Yeah. How much do you charge for a song?
If it's off the street right now, as of August 24th, 2023, it's $5,000 for a full production song.
Nice.
But that kind of like just over time kind of just goes up as to kind of supply and demand.
Sure.
But I mean, that's not like if I know someone well, or if I'm extremely interested in the project, or if the scope of the project requires less time from me. I try not to break it down like that, because it's not like construction work where we're paying for cement and brick and wood and you're paying people by the hour. It's like when you pay for someone's production or arrangement or whatever, you're paying for their kind of their taste, and you're paying for all the lessons they had growing up and their schooling, like their decision making is what you're paying for more. So it's not such a cut and dry service the way that I think most services are.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any genre that you will not write for or work in?
The only time I would not do something is because I feel like I couldn't do a good enough job at it.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like if someone, like I've never done a heavy metal thing, but if someone asked me to do it, I 100% would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did grow up listening to a little bit of metal. So, and I've never gotten a chance to really produce something. And I've done like 30-second things for fun just to test certain tools out, but I've never really done it. But I would totally do that. Yeah. And I've done plenty of hip hop stuff. I would maybe like a full film score is a huge amount of work.
Yeah, sure.
That I probably would not do just because I don't want to open that can of worms. But I have done film scores before for short films where they're less traditional film scores, where you're not arranging for an entire orchestra. You're just taking a really cool sound. Like if you think of like Hans Zimmer, people are really familiar with him now.
Sure.
That's kind of this more modern approach now to film scoring, where there's these interesting sounds. And a lot of times they're kind of atonal, which means that they don't have a note, a discernible note or a discernible melody. They're kind of just a little bit abstract sounding.
Evoking like a mood.
Yes, evoking a mood. And it's funny, in the music industry, there's a lot of conjecture, I think, is that the right word, about like, is this really like music? Like, what are you doing? You're just exploiting these sounds to create emotion. But I mean, that's the point of music in the first place. So that's kind of fun. Or like solo piano stuff, that's kind of fun too. But doing a whole orchestration and hiring an orchestra and conducting it, it's a lot of work. Like if you think of like John Williams composing for Star Wars or Indiana Jones, or you have to have an understanding of music and arrangement that I absolutely do not come anywhere close to having. It's both the emotional intelligence and a craft understanding that is extremely deep.
Are you familiar with Cody Fry?
It sounds familiar, but I don't. But no, not enough to be able to tell you anything about him.
You know who Ben Rector is?
Yes, yeah.
He toured with him a few times. But anyway, Cody Fry did this symphony sessions thing where he went through several of his songs that he kind of wrote, and then took some old songs like Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, and then wrote it as like a symphony piece. And I watched that in-depth series, and just watching him finish that at the end, and literally bawling his eyes out as they finished recording.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I don't have that skill set, but I know enough to be like, wow, that must have taken a lot out of him, because he like comes in and hugs his wife, and he's like bawling.
It's so much work to get to the point to be able to understand that stuff, and then to do it itself is also a lot of work. But yeah, I really like Ben Rector, and actually recently I've been thinking that I would like to emulate a bit certain aspects of his career. I like that he kind of takes these songs one by one and creates these little worlds, kind of like a country song would do, but he does it in a more of a poppy way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, in his most recent album, he had more of like an '80s feel pull into it with the types of instruments and stuff that he was using in the kind of the old techno stuff. So cool.
Yeah, that's trendy right now. People are into
Yeah.
that right now for sure.
Yeah. So what's the next trend going to be, Mr. Goldston?
It's funny because I don't know if this is old news, but like emo kind of music is
Coming back.
a little bit. Like Blink-182 kind of pop punk as well, I think is coming back a little bit. But I forget who it was. I think it was Chopin who like didn't listen to other composers at the time. He just created whatever he wanted to create.
Yeah.
And I think if you're trying to create like top 40 pop tunes, then you need to, I don't want to say you need to, but you got to listen to the stuff.
Yeah, pretty cool.
I think I'm kind of past those days. Like, I'm not trying to create top 40 stuff anymore. I want to create stuff that I think is really cool. And I think often when you do that, you create stuff that other people think is really cool as well. It's less of a bad imitation of something and more an actual expression of, you know, whatever's happening in your head. And this reminds me of this quote that this visual artist Kiki Smith said that I really like and I would like to live by, but it's kind of a big step to live by. It's make your art, and if people need it, they will find it. Right? Don't worry too much about what's going on around you. And I like that a lot because I think that does lend itself to the most interesting and less derivative forms of art. I mean, all art is derivative in a certain sense, right? We're still using like a 12-tone scale and like symmetrical or like 4/4 rhythm, 3/4 rhythm. Like we all kind of have agreed upon certain things, but there's a lot of flexibility outside of that I think can be diminished if you flood your ears with too much of what's happening and trying to create your music in the context of what's happening instead of in the context of what you're feeling.
So let me ask you a question. I ask a lot of athletes this, professional athletes, because it's what they do. So as you and I both know in triathlon, it's like, or any endurance sport, once you get kind of late 30s, mid 40s, I mean, you can still be competitive, but as far as like hitting your peak, you're definitely coming off of it. And I talked with a guy, and I mentioned this on the podcast before, Greg Bennett, and a lot of like professional athletes, they'll be done with this phase of their life, or something will happen, or an Olympian's done, it's their last Olympics, and they fall into like this super deep depression because for so long, since a young age, their identity has been completely wrapped into this person. They didn't figure out how to like disassociate the fact that I, Seth, am an athlete, but I can also be this. It's like once that dies, it's like, have I died? So my question to you, if you somehow lost your ability to use your hands to play music, or lost your ears to be able to hear or to speak or whatever, like one of these abilities, how do you think you would do? And do you ever think about how you identify with what you do and try to disassociate some so that you could move on to something else? Or do you think that's not a problem?
I don't think I've done so intentionally. I think my desire to do a bunch of different things has kind of accidentally created that for me. But yeah, if I were never able to create music again, it would be difficult because it is a big part of my identity now, but I would handle it. It would be okay. It would be okay. I think the thing that really brings me the most joy, I think, is like my eyesight more than anything, more than my ears, is like visual beauty and experiencing the world is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
And I love music so much, but I think if I lost my eyes, that would be that would be the hardest thing. No, I love triathlon too. And I love storytelling. I love photography. I love camping. I love adventuring. I love traveling. I have a lot of things that I truly feel like a deep love for, and I feel really lucky about that. I think it's one of the reasons that I feel so happy is having a bunch of different places to derive happiness from. And something you said earlier about having your identity all wrapped up in something. So many musicians that I went to school with, and where I went to school, like it's mostly made up of people who, up until that moment, their whole life was music. They just lived and breathed music. They rehearsed. They practiced a ton. They put a lot of mental eggs into that basket.
Yeah.
So many of them, I don't want to say they hate music, but man, they are real jaded on it, and they do not enjoy it nearly as much as they used to. And I would say 99% of these people were and are much more skilled than I ever was or will be.
Hmm.
And I still have this love for creating music. And I wonder if it's because I wasn't as naturally gifted at it, maybe. And I've always felt like I had to work for it and let my passion guide me towards success. And whereas them, it's like they had it a little more inherent. Like they were just naturally great at their instrument or whatever they did. Yeah. I love that I still love creating music. I wonder if part of it is because I also spend a ton of time on triathlon stuff, training and kind of the podcast side of things. And I also spend a ton of time on creating videos and making films and photography. I think they all kind of help you. I mean, is it any coincidence then that I picked a sport that's really 3 sports? So you don't really have to do just one. When you're bored of biking, you get to run the next day. And I mean, the main thing, I think the reason that I picked triathlon in general is because, and I've said this before a few different times, but I really stand by this, is that music is really subjective. It's what is good and what is bad is like, sure, there's some like, okay, this note is out of tune, but these are all things that we have created, structures that we have created around music that don't inherently exist, right? We have given meaning to these sounds that doesn't exist in physics, in nature. Whereas triathlon is so objective. Did you go faster? Did you do the work? Did you do the training? There's very measurable and understood ways to get faster, right? You do more volume, you do more intensity, you feel better, you sleep better, you recover better. You're faster than you were the year before. I think for me, having that contrast with music that is, you can work at 10 years at something and be worse than you were 10 years before, even if you're doing everything quote unquote right. So I liked that contrast of the two, the triathlon, the objectivity of triathlon and the subjectivity of music or just art in general, how those two can kind of continue the passion for the other. Right? When I'm feeling like the objectivity of triathlon is just stagnant and stale, then I have the abstract subjectivity of music and vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, so many good excerpts. I'm going to be able to clip up this interview. Just so many cool things.
Good.
So my next question I was going to ask, you created this short film with Eric a while back called Controlled Burn.
Oh, wow. Look at you, Seth. Very nice.
It was, let's just talk about color grading for a second.
Yeah.
I can't color grade, but I know when someone has done a freaking awesome job.
Thank you.
And it was, I will link that in the show notes as well. It was an absolutely beautiful video of literally, was it just Eric running through the woods? I think
just
it was
Eric. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so this won some awards. I believe it was nominated for a couple film festivals.
We got into like 6 or 7 film festivals with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about that experience. Like,
That's
where
so
did the
funny.
idea come from? How did you start it? Getting into the film festivals is awesome. And you even went to something solo because I think Eric was racing or something.
Yes, correct.
So
Correct.
tell me about that story.
So Lululemon reached out to Eric about this new line they had, and they wanted us to make a video about it, or they wanted him to make a video about it. And they kind of just said, do whatever you want to do. And so then Eric was like, okay, this is cool. I'm going to call Nick. We're going to fly him up to Bend, and we're just going to do this trail running thing. He had this idea to run through this part of the park near him that had been burned out on purpose. It was a controlled burn. But I think he liked the double entendre of the controlled burn also being relevant to endurance sport, right? Like it's a controlled burn when you're running. So we kind of played off that and visually played off that as well. And it's a short video. It's like 3.5 minutes, and there's no dialogue at all. It's just music and the sound of him running. But we kind of take it through different phases there, and we did it in we filmed Paula was at home yelling at us that the pizza was getting cold, so we had to rush. But Eric kind of had a lot of these shots in his mind already, and I just took the camera and had and we always work together really well. And just like we have a lot of the same passions for triathlon, we also have the same eye for visuals as well. So we speak the same language all the time. We're always on the same page. And we created this thing. And then my main thing is color grading. That's what I love more than anything in video production. It's so fun, and you get a lot of flexibility. And I think you get to control the emotion a lot through color in a way that is not so obvious to the viewer. They don't realize that they're getting a certain kind of emotion from the color, but it's very fun. So yeah, I spent a good amount of time color grading that, and that was so fun. Oh my gosh! And then we got into a bunch of film festivals with it. One of which was Mountain Film, which I had been to before as a viewer. My mom, there was a film made about my mom
really?
that went to Mountain Film. My mom was kind of still is, but is a mountaineer, and she in Italy, and back in the day, she was a big mountaineer, and was one of the first women in Italy to ever go on Everest, to go an expedition on Everest.
That's insane.
Yeah, she's a badass. And there was a film about her because now she paints mountains. That's her career. She paints specifically the Dolomites in Italy, a mountain range in Italy that's really beautiful. And so there was a film made about her kind of making that transition from being a mountaineer to then painting the mountains. So that's how we discovered that film festival. And then, so of course, when Eric and I made this film, I was like, well, we got to submit to Mountain Film. That's like the coolest place there is. And then we got in. It was really fun to be there and have a film on display there. And I'd love to do it again. Eric and I just made another film this year called, it was with Songwriter. You can Google it it's called The Exploration of Freedom.
Yeah.
Actually, it's called Where Creative Meets Aerobic, where aerobic meets creative. But if you just type in Foreign Writer, Eric Lagerstrom, it'll pop right up. That was really cool too. We shot that in Hawaii, and this time we had like 4 or 5 days. And Eric did a fantastic voiceover for it. But yeah, Eric and I love making these films. We also made like this cool thing with Specialized when he got sponsored by Specialized. That was kind of like a DJ set. Yeah, that was so really cool.
In the
fun.
garage. Yeah.
Yeah, in the garage. Yeah.
We'll link
so
that.
We have a lot of fun with that stuff. And it's nice to have an audience that actually, like, it's really fun to work really hard on something when you know that a lot of people are going to at least give it a shot.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of stuff in music where I worked on something that like barely anyone ever heard.
Yeah.
I've definitely cut my teeth on that.
Yeah. That's so cool, man. So many things. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but when it comes to triathlon, like, how did you first get into triathlon?
Yeah, I was going to school in Boston, and I was skateboarding around everywhere. And I remember like the love I found for skateboarding again, just how cool it was that I could travel through the city so efficiently compared to walking. I really don't love walking. It's very slow, and I feel like I'm not going anywhere. And so the skateboarding kind of scratched this itch of getting around Boston. And Boston, you can actually get around on a skateboard like pretty efficiently. And then they, like my senior year, they installed these city bikes, and yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with them. They like lock into like a little holder thing, and you have to like put in a code. And that's when like it reignited this passion that I had for cycling that I had when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I just loved riding my bike. It was kind of like from motocross. I really wanted to ride motorcycles. But
did you ever race?
I never raced motorcycles, but I did ride dirt bikes.
Yeah, a lot too.
And now I have 2 motorcycles in my garage here because I'm still a little kid on the inside. And I just, this feeling of skateboarding, getting around the city, cycling was just like, even on the city bikes, was just a amplified version of that. It was much more comfortable, much more efficient. I could actually look around and experience the city in a way. It felt like flying. And I thought, this is the best. And then I was walking down Newbury Street in Boston, and there was a kid walking his Fixie Bianchi. And I thought, oh my God, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So then I got myself a Fixie Bianchi.
Nice.
And it kind of snowballed into, I was riding that. Someone told me about Strava. I'm like, oh, I'm getting kind of like close to top 10 on some of these segments on Strava. Wouldn't it be like fun to get like a road bike and actually try it? Like, it really was Strava that brought me that. So kind of one thing led to another. I thought at first I'd be doing bike racing. And I did one bike race. And I just didn't love, I didn't love that it was a little scary being in a pack, and like someone could go down in front of me and then I'd go down too.
Game over.
And then I also like I mentioned earlier, I wanted something really objective, and it wasn't an objective. Like, cycling is in somewhat a measure of your fitness, but in many ways compared to triathlon, in many more ways, it's your tactics and what moves to go with and what wheel to be on and when to make your attack. And I kind of didn't like that if I made something wrong, I made a wrong move, I'd be dropped from the group and my race would be over. Yeah. And it never happened in bike racing to me, but I just decided I would give triathlon a shot. It felt like a crazy challenge and something really different. And I never wanted to be a skinny little cyclist. So I gave it a shot and just loved it right away. I mean, really loved it, and raced a
Yeah.
couple of years just with the road bike. And then I was like, nope, I need a TT bike. And I've just like ramped up my training since then. And
Yeah.
I love it. It's like such a part of my life now. And now, like you're talking about identity, like, man,
Yeah.
triathlon's really a part of my identity now. And
It's like a
especially,
religion.
oh, for sure. Especially for my musician friends. Like, some of them, they're like, oh, he's a professional athlete. That's what he
Yeah.
does. Because compared to them, it's like beers and cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm spent like, do you even like music anymore, dude? Like, it seems like you're training. This is your job.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
wild.
but no, I do love it. I just try to do both as much as I can. And I don't have a day job, so I kind of can train a lot and still work when I want to and make my own hours.
Yeah. So you've done Olympic 70.3s. Have you done a full?
Oh gosh, I have started a full, sure. Yeah. So
Tough day.
I did Ironman Wisconsin last year. It's actually coming up on a year.
No way I'm doing that. That's my second one ever.
Really,
Yeah.
It's the best, dude.
Oh, really? You
I
like them?
loved it. I loved it. I mean, that was the lowest point I've ever had in sport. But but the race itself and Madison, man, I just loved it. I was so ready to make this lifelong memory experience in my head. And then
You did.
I sure did, dude. And you know what? I'm so thankful that I had the podcast, the That Triathlon Life podcast for this, because my being able to like talk about my experience and the amount of people that then echoed similar experiences themselves, it made I'll just tell you the brief story, and we did a whole episode on it.
Yeah,
But it rained all day and it was cold all day and windy all day.
Hype.
And the swim went great. I swam like 112, which I'm a weak swimmer, and so I was very happy with 112.
Yeah.
And then the bike was okay-ish, and I started to get hypothermic at some point. I don't know if I actually got hypothermia, but I feel like it was very, very scary. I was very, very cold. I was not alone in how cold it was. People were like dropping like flies. It was
A lot of pros, I think, even dropped out.
yeah. Nick Chase dropped out. Ben Hoffman dropped out. Yeah, it was a 40% DNF rate that day, which is very high. I got so cold in T2. I was full body shaking in a way that I've never before, and I
my
fully thought
goodness.
my day was over. I was very concerned about getting back to like the Ironman Village from being out on that course. I was freezing cold and kind of bonked. I thought I was
Wow.
eating enough, but I was just like, my whole, like on descents when I wasn't pedaling, my whole body was shaking. And I was like, I had to go
Dude.
slow so I wouldn't fall off the bike. And then there was like a few people in T2 that kind of were encouraging me to go on. They were podcast listeners. They're like, come on, Nick, you got this. And I was like, I do not got this. My day is over. And I gave it a shot, and I actually felt pretty good. I was running like 9-minute pace, right? Or even slower, very slow, compared to what I wanted to run. But it was just, I was so euphoric that I was able to run, and I thought, I'm going to finish this race. And then about at the half marathon mark, I started getting IT band pain, and I had to walk, and I walked as much as I could. I got to mile like 17, 18, and like could barely walk anymore, and was just like hopping and like taking one step and stopping. And the problem with that is that I was getting cold again.
Yeah.
And I was getting really cold again. And by mile 19 on the run, I couldn't. There's no way
Oh, dude,
I was going to
sorry.
make it another 7 miles. Even if I had all the time in the world, I wasn't going to make it. Even if it wasn't cold, like I really couldn't walk.
Wow.
So I had to DNF, and man, that was so
stinks.
hard. But that DNF was nowhere near as bad as how physically horrible and fearful I was on that bike. And then waking up the next morning and just like, oh my gosh, I didn't do it. Oh, it was a really tough feeling. But talking about it on the podcast and then having people message me about their experiences, there's some guy who had like done Coeur d'Alene or something 4 years in a row and DNF'd every year and finally made it on the 5th year. Like, oh man, that is some mental fortitude. So I want to do an Ironman. I want to try it again. I would do it this year if I thought that this IT band thing wouldn't be a problem. But I think
Are you still fighting it?
I'm not really fighting it, but I think 12 hours into a race, it's a problem,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Oh
So
man.
I'm trying to figure that out. Even in my last 70.3, I did more obey, and it started to be a problem on the bike. So I
Mm.
thought, oh, I'm definitely not ready for a full then.
Yeah. Oh man. So I struggled for 4 months last year, 3.5 months with IT band stuff. I went on a trail run, then I ran through it, and then it was like
Same.
after a
That's how it
mile.
started for me too. A trail run, I ran through it, and then that was in like 2019, and I've had it since then.
Are you still like? Are you doing any kind of PT stuff?
It's so the issue is the IT band syndrome is actually a symptom of some dysfunction in my biceps femoris tendon, which is the tendon on the
Oh,
outside
okay.
of your knee, behind your knee there. So I'm trying to figure that out. I was doing like glute med strengthening stuff. I'm sure that's what they told you to do too for IT band stuff. But I'm just, it's hard because it's not swim, bike, run. And I'm like, oh, this is boring. Like I want to be
Yeah.
swimming, biking, or running. But at a time I was doing the exercises and I felt like it didn't help at all.
Mm.
What fixed it for you?
Yeah. So I mean, it was a number of different things. So I before triathlon a couple of years ago, I was just kind of doing whatever, and I was like wanting to get big, strong.
Yeah.
So I was in doing like do what?
No, nothing. Yeah, I agree. I actually used to lift a bunch too. That was like my
Yeah.
main thing.
So I was doing that, and like I was gaining quite a bit of like muscle just all over. I was just trying to get bigger, because I would like on a heavy day, I'm 130 pounds. Back then, when I was getting into it, I was like
Whoa.
118.
How? Oh, wow. I would
I'm
not have
short.
guessed that. How short are you?
I'm 5'5.5" ish.
That still feels like light for 5'5".
Yeah,
So,
I'm pretty small.
wow. You seem like your proportions are great. I feel like
This
on
chair, I'm
camera.
also
Yeah.
like have this seat jacked up.
Nice, nice. I
So
love it.
anyway,
I
this
love
is
it.
my 6-inch bicep. No.
Got it. Great. It looks
So
like a
anyway, I
12-inch
started.
bicep.
Yeah. So I started doing a lot of strength, and then I started in triathlon, and that carried me through for probably like a year and a half, where I didn't need to do strength training, and then the body just started to go downhill, especially as I started getting into like more of an Ironman training.
Yeah.
So when the IT band thing happened, I started doing. I just Googled a billion how to get rid of IT band things, and I tried a bunch of stuff.
I
And
did
what
this.
worked for
I remember
me,
this exact same
yeah,
process.
man.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's over, hun. My running career is over. Triathlon's done. I'm done. She's like, it's just a season, get over it type of thing. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. But it took a long time. So I was doing like I lay on my side with the IT band, and I
Yeah.
do like
That's the glute
three
med
times a
stuff.
week,
Yeah.
and then do the knees. And now that I'm doing like squats and auxiliary like compounded movement stuff, it's gone away.
Yeah.
Um,
I find that the squats and lunges and deadlifts are the best thing for me, actually.
Yeah.
Not so much the glute med stuff. It's just like overall body strength stuff is what
Yeah.
helps the most.
Yeah, for sure. And it was made a huge difference too for just strength training in general. Once I started running again, I felt like I was not just like trying to keep up with my legs, but my legs
Dude,
were
I
grabbing the
totally
ground and
agree.
like pulling it through.
There's something about like when you've done some strength training, you just feel like you realize that your body was like just like flopping all over the
It
place,
literally,
kind of,
like-
And when you just like noodling around, and when you have that strength stuff, at least the perception is, oh, I'm so much more solid and upright, and my core isn't just like collapsing every time I take a step.
Yeah. Yeah, it made a huge difference. So now I'm like, I preach it all the time before I go riding with my friends, and I drop them. I'm like, oh, it's because I did squats yesterday. If you did that too, then you could also be strong.
Totally, I love it. I love it. Yeah, flex on them.
Yeah, I know, it's so fun. So what's your goal for the rest of the season and like going into next year?
Yeah, good question. I'm kind of battling with this dread that I face before certain races. It really removes the enjoyment of racing for me for most races. For an Olympic or a sprint, not at all. Love it. It's very fun for me to do. Maybe a little bit the night before, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? But even like when I wake up in the morning and I'm running racing, it's very fun. But for 70.3s, man, it's like 4 or 5 days before the race it starts, and it's
No, sure.
like a deep fear. I don't really understand. It maybe has something to do with the expectations I set for myself. But the truth is, like, if you told me, like, guess what, you're going to do terrible at this race, I would be like, oh, okay, fine. So it's not quite that. There's something else. I think it's just about like 4 hours or 5 hours of just pain that you're putting yourself through. I think maybe that's like my brain's just trying to avoid that at all costs. So I'm trying to fix that in my head. But I have a race October 1st. I'm racing Malibu Triathlon, really fun race.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that. And I'm trying to maybe do 170.3 before the year is over. I finally like fixed this problem I was having that I wasn't able to run well off the bike for 70.3. and the solution, at least for me, was I didn't realize this at the time, and there was nothing in my body that was telling me this, but I just wasn't fueling enough on the bike. And so when I got to the run, I would run okay for a little bit and then just like fall off hard.
Yeah.
And then Morro Bay, like the fastest I had run before then in a 70.3 was like 145, so like 8-minute miles. And then in Morro Bay, I ran a 129. So like a 14, like 650 pace. It's huge. Like I'm not that much fitter than I was before. I just figured out the fueling thing. So for me, that was a big thing. So now that I figured that out, I want to put together a full race because my swim wasn't great and my bike wasn't that great either that day. So I'd like to be able to put together a full race when I feel really good. I would love to qualify for world championships in 70.3, but I don't know if physiologically my body is able to keep up with those guys that are just so fast.
Let's go do 70.3 Florida, and we'll get your slot, and we'll go there together. Yeah.
I'm not trying to sweat my eyeballs out of my head.
It'll be in December. It's not that bad. I live in the South, though, so all I do is swim when I'm on the bike.
Right, and that's a pretty flat race, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, it's Haines City, yeah. It was the first ever Ironman branded race I did, and it's, like, ultra flat.
Yeah,
the run is no joke, but, yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, so, like, the way that Haines City is kind of, like, in this bowl, and then they have the lake, and then the run kind of goes throughout these, like, neighborhoods that have, like, these quite big elevation. I forget. There's got to be at least... I want to see 800-900 feet, maybe a little bit more of elevation in Florida.
Yeah. I kind of like that. I do a ton of trail running, and I love trail running, so I think I kind of have the strength endurance in my legs to be able to work through things like that. So I don't mind that, but I'm 170 pounds, which is just it's not heavy, but it's heavier than the guys that are going really fast, and so I benefit from a flatter course for sure.
Yeah, for sure. How tall are you?
5'11".
But nice, tall man compared to me.
Yeah,
which is 90% of the population.
Hey, but you're faster, dude. Like you're a faster runner because of it, guaranteed, and a faster cyclist.
So swimming and cycling, I've been decent. I've never been able to put together like a super solid run. My best run was at Blue Ridge and did really well swim and bike, but I only did like a 6:55 average, and I always have this cramping issue that I cannot figure out in my gut. Ooh. So for whatever that's about.
I don't envy that. That's tough. But yeah, I imagine you're going to unlock it the way that I unlocked it, and you'll run something like low 6. I see it. I see it in your future, Seth.
Oh, thanks, man. I'll make sure to quote this and put it over the video.
Please.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, if you're interested to do Ironman Haines City, Florida in December, it'd be fun.
Just drop a quick $1,000 and fly down to Florida and sweat my eyeballs.
Yeah. What's $1,000 these days?
What's $1,000?
That's like you could do one song. Boom.
That's true. You're right. It's a fifth of a song.
Yeah, I'll have you do a song for me.
Great.
Cool, man. Oh, Nick, thank you so much for jumping on, man. It's been super fun. Such a pleasure and honor to meet you. Look forward to linking all these things from Control Burn, TTL podcast, and merch, which you are wearing right now. Some of your music stuff. We'll talk about the Emmy in the notes.
Grammy. Oh my God,
the Grammy. I'm so sorry.
You and Christian Blumenfeld. I'm friends with Christian. He always calls it an Emmy too.
Oh goodness, Grammy.
Yeah.
Aerobic meets where aerobic meets what? And it was
creative.
Writer. Creative.
Yeah.
Okay, meets creative.
Yeah.
And then the specialized video. We'll link all those.
Wow, that is.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone that's going to want to look through all that stuff, but I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, Seth.
Yeah, for sure, man. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Stupid Questions with Nick Goldston. As you heard, Nick is a super talented guy. Super thankful to have him on, and what he is doing in his professional career with music, and also his professional career with triathlon, and his professional career with that triathlon life and all the merch that they do is just so cool. Really huge shout out to TTL and everything that they are doing to kind of grow the sport and foster things from new pros who are trying to make it in the sport through the TTL Devo team, and just so many other things with their podcast and YouTube, which will all be linked in the show notes. Check it out. We're going to have, like I said, the Control Burn video, the Songwriter Co., where aerobic meets creative, Nick's music, the TTL podcast, and the merch, the Grammy win stuff, specialized video that they did with the little music stuff, all of it, super awesome. Please do check it out. And don't want to forget, this episode is sponsored by Trex Running Shorts. Go check them out as well. And thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next one.